What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I know that I've been in hiatus. Well, that's all due to work, and I just took the family down to Florida on vacation. So Jamie, Rodney, Bryson, we appreciate the hospitality. We had a great time down in Florida, and we also got to go to the Kennedy Space Center and watch a SpaceX rocket launch. Was really cool. So the thumbnail, you want to know what's so special about Casper C4 and how it's able to hold big amount of power. Well, let me start this out by saying it's best to have the right tool for the job. Do I think this C4 is the right transmission for Casper? No, I don't. I really don't, because we are really going to push the boundaries of this transmission. But what I want to do is show you the difference in what makes this transmission special and how it can handle so much power. With only 94 days before the No Name Nationals, I've got to get all of this put together, made it up to that, and get it in that. So as you can see, it's a lot of work. I was going to do an assembly video, and I decided against that because there are some things that are proprietary to dynamic racing as far as clutch clearances and band settings and things of that sort. So what I'm going to do, we're going to talk about the things that go into making a C4 go from a regular production vehicle transmission, something from a mundane car, to something that can run into 8s in the quarter mile. So that's what this video is about. So if you will remember my teardown video that I did on the tailgate of Casper, I pretty much went through the transmission and did a teardown, kind of explaining things as I went along. What you're actually looking at here is a dynamic racing Mighty Mite M2 C4. So I think it's important to give a little background on dynamic racing and where the Mighty Mite transmission came from. You see, back in the late 90s, I think around maybe 2000, when NMRA came about, there was a class called Renegade. And if you don't know what NMRA is, National Mustangs Racers Association, okay? And so there was this class called Renegade, and at the time, cars were running in the mid-9s, thereabouts. And a lot of people, the rule stated that you had to run the original equipment brand transmission, meaning that if it Mustang, it's got to run a Ford transmission. A lot of guys relied on C6s for their transmission of choice, but that soon changed when you're running a heads-up class. You're always looking for an edge over the competition, and so people decided to give the overlooked C4 a second look, and the guys at Dynamic Racing really took it to the next level as far as the development work of putting in a lot of man hours into this transmission, into getting it to live into that 8-second ET zone, which is pretty impressive. But like I said, everything comes with a price, and it's all about using the right transmission for the right job. This is what I have, and I'm going to run it. We've got plans, going to put a Turbo 400 in it so I can bracket race it for a while. And then probably down the road, NSB Custom Cars, it will get a Linko. But the thing about this is, I've had a lot of people saying that it's going to grenade this transmission. And that's where I believe something different. From my experience with C4 transmissions that have been built properly, they don't break hard parts. The problem lies in the clutch friction area. There's not enough surface area on the friction plates to hold the horsepower for a long period of time. You know, typically when you're running that fast in the 8s in the quarter mile, which we know, and I know because I had a C4 in my blue Mustang for years and years and years, loved it. And yeah, we were getting 40 to 50 passes from the high gear clutches. We'd have to take it out, put clutches back in it. It wouldn't hurt any hard parts, but that was just one of the prices of admission. And then we finally gave up and went to a Glide and haven't looked back since. But this is an excellent transmission. When used in the right application, it can be awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through, beginning with the input shaft and go all the way back through the transmission so that you can get an idea of what's what. What you're looking at here is a 300M hardened input shaft. It is the .839 diameter, and if you want to have a high horsepower car and use a C4, this is a must, especially if you're going to drag race it and hook it up with slicks. Dynamic does offer a C6 input shaft conversion where you can use the C6 input shaft in the C4, but I'm still running the C4 shaft. Alright, let's take this apart here. And here you can see the Ford drum. Okay, the factory drum has these kidney bean holes here, and they actually braze it up for additional strength. That is something that you'll see in a properly built C4. They do make billet drums now. There's a company out there, but they're kind of pricey, so just keep that in mind. On this particular unit, this is running a 5 clutch disc Ford pack. Now some companies will offer a 6 disc, but Dynamic doesn't really think that that's necessary because these clutches are always on apply, meaning that they're always engaged. So, which brings me to the next topic. Here are the clutches that I'm putting back in Casper. Alto Reds, Borg Warner Tans. Now these, you will notice, are flat. You see, there's no oil grooves in it. And the reason why is once these are applied, it's not going to slip if you have it set up right and you have the right line pressure, so on and so forth. But you'll notice wafer grooves on the direct or high gear clutches. That is so that oil can be evacuated to the outside, because these are dynamic running clutches. They're not static applied like those. These actually apply while parts are moving, which means that any kind of transmission fluid in there can create slippage between it, and so these little grooves help evacuate that oil out. Now, you'll hear choline steels. You know, people talking about choline steels, and that's what these are right here. They are coated with a friction material that helps it grab and not slip compared to a traditional type steel. Once again, you can run cholines in both the Ford and the direct packs, but it's not really necessary in the Ford because it doesn't see the stresses of shifting from that second gear to third gear like these do. Now, one thing I want to note about Dynamic, these look like the same size, and in a regular C4 they are the same size, but when you put this over this, you can see that it is marginally larger than the Ford clutch. This is one of those little tricks I was telling you. This clutch is actually from an AOD transmission, and so the diameter is close enough. They modify the drum to where it'll work, and you don't think that that little bit of extra clutch area makes a difference, but it's huge with these C4s, because that's all you have holding the power in that 2-3 shift. And what will happen is, I've never had a C4 shift as hard on the 2-3 shift, or any automatic transmission for that matter, than this transmission right here. But what happens is, as the clutches wear, and you can tell when it's time to freshen it up, because when you go from the 2nd to 3rd gear shift, you will get what's called flare, and the engine will rev up slightly before it grabs. Once it starts doing that, you need to stop and go ahead and get it tore down and get the problem fixed to keep the problem from happening again. Now, some companies, I don't know if they still do, but they used to offer a 7 clutch pack where you can put 7 clutches in it. And I've ran that before, but the problem is, you've only got so much room in this clutch drum right here for clearance. And so anytime you try to put an extra clutch in there, your steels get thinner. And what happens is the plates will actually warp by being too thin. So it's kind of like a balancing act that you have to have, and Dynamic feels it's better to have 6 clutches with a proper size steel in order to keep things in check. Now, one thing that I didn't talk about, I'm supposed to be going in order, but I kind of missed the boat. This is the critical part in the C4. This is the pump. This little transmission, the pump is everything, because you have to run these at such high line pressure in order to make those clutches hold. Now, if I had a Turbo 400 clutch or a C6 clutch to compare, this is tiny. I mean, the amount of friction area is substantially different. And that's what the weak point of the C4 is. Another thing about the C4s, cores are getting very scarce, and finding good pumps are next to impossible to do. So if you get one and it has a good pump, hang on to it with dear life. The pump gears that they offer today have a questionable service record. So yeah, but if you'll notice that in this transmission here, a little selective washer. Let's see here. I'm going to take this apart. Try to do it one-handed. Okay. And this is another dynamic thing. Now, this transmission is fully rollerized. It has all Torrington bearings in it. Now, when you start making some big power, this is another problem area. This is the planetary gear set. The factory comes with 3 planets shaped in a triangle, and they run on thrust washers, bronze thrust washers. So if you notice, this actually has 6 pinion planetary, and it's ran on a Torrington bearing to reduce friction, because what will happen under really high horsepower, and if you get lack of lubrication, that gear will actually dig into this carrier and it'll seize up, and when that happens, the party is over. I have been there and done that. Another thing that gets overlooked, in my opinion, when it comes to building transmissions in general, is people just like to take them apart, put good stuff in it, and put it back together. They overlook the importance of the bushings. And I don't know if it's because they don't want to change them out, take the extra time. But the bushings are so important because that keeps everything in line and helps reduce hydraulic leaks in the system, if that makes sense. You know, going on down the line here, let's see here, let's look. The band. You can see that this is a heavy-duty Kevlar band, and for both, and you can see the writing is still both on these bands. And these bands have probably, gosh, 10,000 miles on them, plus maybe a couple hundred passes at least, I'm sure of. And you can still see the writing. So making sure that you use a good rigid band, and that goes a long way. Another area of concern is making sure that your rear sprag one-way clutch is in good working order. Make sure that the springs are not broken in there. And it really all goes to attention to detail, especially looking at the pump gears, making sure that everything is up to snuff. But on these C4s, you will typically hear about servos. Now you can see that I have a billet servo here, and that's really not necessary. I mean, if you have a good C servo, which are getting really hard to find, I think I've only seen one in my life. Yeah. Or H servo, they work really good, but I decided to go billet just for the sake of a little bit more peace of mind. The low reverse servo piston assembly doesn't require a lot of attention. This is where all the work is at. When you get it in the vehicle, making sure something as simple as the shifter being dead nuts right can have a huge impact. Temperature, transmission temperature. 99% of the people out there do not run a temperature gauge on their transmission, and that can kind of get you into trouble because you really have no idea if your transmission is overheating or not. And for a C4, that is a death sentence. Dynamic, JR told me he's always wanted his transmissions to run around 180 degrees. If you see it getting up around 200 to 210 degrees, then you need to turn the car off. The transmission is starting to cook itself, and those clutches will be burnt up, your fluid will be burnt up, and yeah, you'll have to go in and redo everything. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that go into making a C4 live. Does that mean that's all of them? No. You know, there's probably more secrets, especially like in the sealing rings. You get into the whole cast ring versus nylon ring debate. You know, this transmission uses nylon. But one of the things I think that people talk about a bunch is fluid. People run anything from hydraulic fluid to type F to Dextron, all of this and that. So when talking to JR about this transmission in the very beginning, he told me that he recommended, guess what? Their fluid. His stuff works great. I don't know what's in it. Like I said, I'm not a transmission guy, but I do know that it makes this transmission run cooler and it makes clutches last longer. And that's a huge thing. So, you know, if you've never dove into a transmission before, don't be scared about it. But if you have a transmission guy that you know and trust, stick with him. You know, it's up to you. But I think this C4 is going to surprise a lot of people. And guess what? I only need it to last how many passes? No Name Nationals, me, Uncle Tony, I've got so many call outs. Just Mopar Joe, Brian from Lunar Outlaw, John Cope, and Haney. I'm really looking forward to that, John. That's going to be awesome. So yeah, I love that truck. Thumper, the sweaty fat guy. There's a lot. So when we get to the No Name Nationals, I'm going to round robin Casper as long as I can keep his transmission cool and keep it going rounds. And until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I got to get back to work. Catch you later.